Hello everybody, this is Kiran and today we are going to learn about another SDLC model which is spiral model. Let's begin. Now, we have already learned about Waterfall V model. Today we are going to learn something about spiral model, which is having a special phase, risk analysis phase. So basically, for critical projects which involves risk, we should choose spiral model over other models. So we'll learn how it is different from waterfall, V or agile model, and also how all the steps of SDLC are involved in this model. Now, what we can do quickly is take an example of a project and then see how spiral works. So once you learn the flow of spiral, then we can see other concepts or aspects of this model. Now let me try to annotate this diagram. Let's annotate this and understand. Now, first of all, where all the steps of SDLC are involved. So first step of SDLC was requirement gathering and planning and designing of those requirements. So that all has been collated into first section, which is determining the objective. Now, after designing of those requirements, there was coding phase. And so before that, there is a new phase involved in this diagram, which is analyzing the risk and resolving those risks. Third phase is about coding and testing. So they have been merged here into the third section, which you can see, coding and testing. And final was deployment and maintenance. So for now, we are actually planning for the next iteration. So let's say this is the fourth phase. It's an iterative model, guys. Okay, so after planning for the next iteration, it goes on, and when the final spiral happens, after that there is release or deployment. Okay, so this is how all the steps of SDLC are there, with an additional step which is identifying the risks and resolving it. Now, we have to understand this spiral using an example. Let's say you want to build a house. Now, you wanted to build a house, you have a plan that, okay, you need a 2-bedroom apartment. So you went to the builder and explained them the objectives. So the builder is asking you questions that, okay, what all you want. So all the objectives were explained. It starts from here, the center, okay. So you explain, fine, I want, so all the requirements were gathered here. So you explain, I need a 2-bedroom apartment. This will be the size and this is the location, and that's how I want it to be. All the requirements were gathered by that builder. Then any risks, if at all involved, were analyzed. That, okay, if you build the apartment in this area, these are the risks involved. Or if you build a 2-bedroom apartment, only the size of the hall which remains is this much. So all the risks involved were analyzed, and if any remedial actions were needed, were taken. So, you know, if the location is not good enough, maybe the location was changed, sizes were changed, or whatever risks could be analyzed were corrected. And then there is coding and testing. So basically, though 2 bedrooms were made and tested, and then the next iteration was planned, wherein you mentioned that, okay, fine, now since the 2 bedrooms are ready, I want the ceiling and floor to be like this. We should have some false ceiling, the flooring should be marble, or whatever you decide. So this planning happens here. Then you give all the requirements here. Then another risks analysis phase, wherein if any risks is involved with the materials involved or anything is identified and rectified, and then coding that is actual building and testing, and then you say, okay, now the ceiling and flooring is done. Now let's plan and do the electrical appliances, or maybe the woodwork. Maybe the woodwork can be before that. So woodwork is decided, okay, fine, the furnitures and the doors, windows, everything. So you give all the requirement that is gathered properly, and the risks, if at all any involved, are actually identified and then resolved. Then again it is coded as in its operation happens and the testing happens. Then you say, okay, now I need the electrical appliances, and all the requirements are gathered, and then risks, if at all any, are identified and rectified. Then again coding and testing, and then it's released. Like you have your flat ready by this end of the spiral. That's how spiral model works. There are 4 sections. Majorly the difference of this model is its risk analysis phase which is involved, and it is an iterative model. So what you're giving, you're not giving the entire requirements and in the beginning, you're giving chunks of requirements. In the beginning you gave some set of requirements, then you progressed and iterated on that requirement. Okay, now this, and then further this and this, and so you actually grow like that, and finally you finish off your project. Same example can be used to understand any project or any software development also. Why this example was given? So that this entire model is easily understood. Once you understand this, you can apply this into software also. Now let's go back to the PPT. So here is the same diagram. It's a risk-driven iterative model. We already talked about it. Divides the project into iterations: 1 spiral, 2 spiral, 3 spiral, and so on. And each iteration will deal with 1 or more risks which are involved. That's the beauty and the speciality of this model. Each iteration starts with small set of requirements, and then you go about completing that, and then again, and then so on until the final deployment will happen. So yes, what's happening here? The customer is coming into the picture after every iteration. Now this is difference. This is the major one of the major differences again from Waterfall on V and where the client is coming into picture. So now when you start from here and then here, after you release and plan for the next iteration, the client is able to see what's ready and then give feedback, and those feedbacks can be worked upon and changes can be done. So there is more client satisfaction certainly in this model. Moving forward. Okay, how long to iterate? Because it's iteration in the spiral model, so you have to know that how long to iterate. So you have to iterate until all the major risks are addressed as in they are resolved or some remedial actions have been taken. So till then you should iterate in this model. Now advantages of spiral model: it's high critical risk functions are developed first. Yes, because here if something is very risky, it will be developed first, and so that in the later phases the higher risks are no more left. You have already taken steps to resolve those. And of course there is more client satisfaction because the client is coming into picture after every iterations, and same pointer actually written in a different language, that users or the client are actually tied to all the life cycle steps, because he's able to know that what risks are coming. He's giving the feedback accordingly. Its resolution is done. Then he is able to see all the coding happening, testing happening, everything. He's tied up closely across all the phases. There can be feedbacks, early feedbacks also, and feedbacks from the client which are welcome, and there are remedial actions taken and updations happen based on their feedbacks. So yes. Now the weaknesses, certainly there must be weakness. So one of the major weaknesses which I can think of right now is a lot of time is spent on evaluation of the risk. So if the risks are not huge, if it's a small risk or low risk, so a lot of resources and time is invested. It's a costly model for sure. You cannot work on this model if the project doesn't have costing involved, because the people who will be involved in this risk analysis needs to be expert of that domain, and they will come at a cost, and the technologies involved will come at a cost. So it is a costly model overall. The model is complex. It's not an easy model for sure, like waterfall, wherein you just need to wait till the one phase is over, then start on with the next phase and so on. Here you are actually performing chunks of requirements, so you have to have a very good planning, and the complexity is a lot more than any previous models which we have learned. Now, if you have a clear SRS, you know that what to do. So in that case, it might be a difficult model, because here changes are allowed. Even suppose you know what to do and you have a clear software requirement specification. Now you've started working and there is feedback. So the specification that okay, you till this date you had to deliver this will change now because there are feedbacks. So you have to be flexible and you have to do those changes also. So if you have a clear milestone, then this model won't be very helpful in that case. Again, as I said, expertise is required, because somebody not belonging to the domain or not having knowledge on the previous on a project similar to that will not be able to find out enough risk or do steps to remove those risks. So yes, assessment expertise is required. Sometimes the spiral may go on indefinite number of times, and the project may never end because the client can be very much nosy, the risks can be never ending and things like that, so the spiral can be indefinite. So that's yet another weakness of this model. Now once the iteration is finished, it might be sometimes difficult to come up with the next iteration plan, because you never know what feedbacks will come, and to reach the milestone in the defined time might also be difficult. That's how complex is this model, because once you start on with this set of requirements, you do the risk analysis, finish it off. The risk which will come later on in the next iteration might be lot time taking, and it might take a lot of time to get resolved. So you can't just have a defined timeline, milestone, everything in this model. Now when to use the spiral? Of course, when you have that the risk is involved, only then we should use. For medium to high risk project, yes, there should be risk. When creation of prototype is appropriate, when the client actually want to see things happening and developing, so then you should use this model. When the cost and risk evaluation is important, when there is costing involved and the risk evaluation is important, then you should use this model. When people are actually not very sure what they want, they need change, they want to update, they want to give feedbacks, and when they want to experiment with things, then this model will be helpful, isn't it? Requirements are complex. Yes, of course, it's not an easy model to work with. When the requirements are complex, then you should use this model. When there is a new product line, like in the waterfall, we discussed that you should work on matured products, that okay, something is already there, you're actually creating new versions to the software. But here, when everything is completely new, you should use this model, because you can start from the scratch in this model. When you know no significant changes will happen, so you're already aware that yes, changes might happen, so then you cannot choose waterfall or V, so you should choose this model. That's all for spiral model today. We learned about what spiral is, how it works. We took an example of building of an house, and then we understood this model. We saw how all the SDLC steps are divided into 4 different phases. Then we learned about the advantages and disadvantages of this model. We also learned when to use this model. In the next session, we learn about Agile model, which is very popular and very important to learn. So let's meet in the next session. Thank you.